I think that one thing that's going to need to happen more often is whenever I have random thoughts on Twitter, I need to start making vlogs about them because they actually come up as pretty good ideas. In fact, somebody had said that when I put something out on Twitter tonight, right before I recorded this. So I was thinking about something today. I think about comics a lot. I think about my own work quite a bit and where to go with it, and then I'll sit down and I'll write for 5 or 10 minutes, either outline something for the future or something along those lines. And of course, if Project Lazarus doesn't go anywhere, then it's all going to be for naught. But if nothing else, I'm having fun, and that's the important thing. But I was thinking about one of my favorite comics ever that I only read just about a year and a half ago. And for those who don't know this, my favorite comic book team is the Avengers. Always has been. I've always loved the Avengers because I always liked the lineup. I always thought the lineup of characters was always very colorful, very varied. I loved that there was a lot of interplay between the two of them. There was a lot of character focus in those comics. My first Avengers story, oddly enough, that I ever read was West Coast Avengers. Which is one where, oddly enough, Wonder Man gets cucked by Hank Pym. I shit you not. Issue 1 of West Coast Avengers has Simon showing up with Tigra with him. The next issue, she's making out with Hank Pym on the couch, and Wonder Man walks by the window completely fucking oblivious to the world, so high on his own farts. He's just like... Meanwhile, Tigra's sucking face with Hank Pym in the next room. Like, it's a great run. It was John Byrne who wrote that, oddly enough. And if you've never read West Coast Avengers, that's another one of my favorite books ever. But that was my first Avengers book. I didn't get into the Avengers until I got into college. And, because you got to keep in mind, when I was a kid, I just read Spider-Man. That was it. Didn't read Batman, didn't read, most of my comic book knowledge came from when I went to college. It's like, it seems like I learned everything those years. Philosophy, theology, comic books. That was pretty much... Video games, too. But anyway, how I had time for a girlfriend is beyond me. But that's beside the point. Point is that I was thinking about Jonathan Hickman's run on Avengers specifically. Now, Jonathan Hickman is an interesting guy. Because when you think of the Fantastic Four, and you think of the Avengers... He is the last guy who has written those books, and you would think is, like one of the best writers of those books. Grab my drink here. With Amazing Spider-Man, who was the last great writer to write Spider-Man? Well, it was J. Michael Straczynski. Dan Slott's early parts of his run up till Spider Island and Superior were good, but it wasn't as good as, JMS's run. And then before JMS, it was David Michelini. So, the thing about Jonathan Hickman is that he's known for being incredible when it comes to crafting a narrative, and when it comes to crafting solid characters and really telling a deep story in comic books, but still being able to maintain the over-the-top, big action, big stakes feel of a comic. Especially one such as his run on Avengers. Avengers is always big. Because why on earth would you have a team that exists where it's got... Your leadership is Cap, Iron Man, and Thor... And then you have people like the Scarlet Witch and Wonder Man and, Hank Pym and the Wasp and the Hulk and all these other major characters fighting under one banner. Not Bruce Banner, you know what I mean. But why would you do that? Well, they're only going to fight the biggest threats. And oddly enough, Hickman is one of my favorite Avengers writers. He might be my favorite. Actually, I would say he's probably my favorite. My second favorite, oddly enough, for those who don't know, Jeff Johns. Yeah, if you've never read Jeff Johns' Avengers before he went to DC, holy shit. His work, I'm trying to, it's not Red Tide. What is the name of it? Red Zone. So, for those who don't know about Jeff Johns, just real quick, he wrote an arc called Red Zone for the Avengers, which also was a storyline that brought back the Red Skull after he had kind of been considered dead for a while. And then after that, of course, you have Brubaker's Captain America, which followed not that long afterwards. But Johns was right before Bendis, and before Bendis fucked up everything because Bendis. Take a shot. But anyway, Hickman was the best since Johns. And it really was an interesting story when you think about it. And maybe I should start doing this more with like, writers and their best stuff. Hickman's Avengers is an interesting storyline because it is about the death of a universe. And in a way, it is the last great Marvel book ever. Because it doesn't seem like writers at Marvel are trying, unless your name is Donny Cates. I shit you not, the only book I'm reading from Marvel at this point is Venom, because it's the only one worth the paper it's printed on. But anyway, so what is Jonathan Hickman's Avengers? What makes it so special? Well, again, it is about the death of the 616 universe. It's about the death of the Marvel multiverse. Though they're sort of now kind of bringing little pieces of it back. This was basically about its end and how it would end. And it's this dark story about what's called convergences, where two parallel worlds would come together. And then the Illuminati, in the new Avengers book, would have to basically, destroy a world. And it was about the psychological toll that it took on men like Reed Richards, like Black Panther, like, who was even in the Illuminati at this point? Namor would be another one, and just kind of their clash of personalities. I have in front of me, oddly enough, the graphic novel for Infinity. This was the big event that is the middle of the story of Jonathan Hickman's Avengers. It goes with the beginning of it, and then there's Infinity, and then there's, what is the final parts? No Way Out or something like that? I don't remember. My brain's not working very well tonight. It's 11 o'clock when I'm recording this. But anyway, the Illuminati at this point was Doctor Strange, Namor, Black Panther, Mr. Fantastic, Black Bolt, Beast, and Iron Man. And a lot of it has to do with examining their characters in a deeper way. And Jonathan Hickman is wonderful at that. The Avengers at the time of this book was Cap, Thor, Iron Man, of course, Spider-Woman, the Jessica Drew version, before she got pregnant. And this is where it gets interesting, because Hickman had a very unique lineup to his Avengers. It's probably my favorite Avengers outside of the classic one, where it's like Cap, Thor, Iron Man, Vision, Wonder Man, Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and I'm forgetting some other people. And there's still some mainstays in here, but it's a very different team in a lot of ways. Like Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel, Carol was always a mainstay in the Avengers for the longest time, and she's one of my favorites. I've always loved Carol in an Avengers story. I don't like her in her own book anymore, because her own book is trash. Let's see here. But he had also brought in Sunspot and Cannonball from the X-Men books. Created new characters like Nightmask, the Abyss, a new Starbrand, another character called Ex Nihilo. For those of you who don't know, Latin means from nothing. If you read the first arc, and Time Runs Out is the finale of this series. It leads into Secret War. But Abyss was in there. There was a new Captain Universe who was very, very unique in the way that she was presented. Hawkeye's back, of course, because it's Hawkeye. Wolverine's still around. Bruce Banner, Hulk. Widow, Falcon, a new Smasher. For those of you who don't know Smasher, it's a member of the Shi'ar Imperial Guard. And then my favorite new addition, Hyperion. A new Hyperion, who wore a black and yellow costume instead of the red and yellow. And very well written character in this story, in all of these stories. He had a bromance with Thor that I genuinely wonder, if I ever got to write the Avengers, I would love to have Beta Ray Bill and Thor on the same team, just to see if I could reduplicate that kind of magic. But anyway, but that would probably be cheating, wouldn't it? But anyway, what Hickman did, or what he was willing to do with this story, and with not just with Infinity, but with his entire book, was to go hard sci-fi with it. Just full-on sci-fi story. Not, they're constantly protecting the Earth or whatnot. There is an overarching problem, and it is very, very complex and has to be picked apart. And there's a lot of players in this story. And it really is just a masterpiece of a book. It is, again, the best Marvel comic in ages. I think it's one of the few comics I can think of that is like universally praised, that was published in the last 10 years, that is loved both by fans and by critics. But anyway, in fact, one thing, for those of you who have never read this, even Infinity here, this is half of the inspiration for Infinity War, in a sense. A lot of the characters and players and Thanos' attitude are somewhat brought from this, but more so from Jim Starlin. But the Black Order first appeared in Infinity, and their characterization is basically, in the film, is lifted straight from Hickman's work on this book that I'm holding, that I've got right here. Thanos, though, is written like Jim Starlin wrote him in that film. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling a bit in this video, but there's so much information to really talk about to really bring this book together, so this will probably be a longer video. What is it that makes Hickman's Avengers so good? First is the hard sci-fi bit. One thing I really like about Jonathan Hickman is he is a great science fiction writer. His Fantastic Four was hard sci-fi, as it should be. His Avengers is hard sci-fi. He's got a book that he's making right now called East of West, which is basically a sci-fi take on the idea if America never got over the Civil War. And it is a brilliant book about the apocalypse, and I love it. It's one of my favorite end times style stories, because it takes scriptural influence, but it kind of twists it just in enough of a way to make it feel not so much holy or anything like that, but rather this sort of retelling of an old story, if that makes any sense. Just kind of a modern retelling of the apocalypse, of Revelation, in a lot of ways, in a very unique scenario. But anyway, but Hickman's really good with sci-fi. It's just his thing. I would love to read his take on a lot of different books, just because of what he would do with them. And it's unfortunate, because it seems like he's done with the big two. And really, in my opinion, he should be the one writing Iron Man right now, not Dan Slott. Because I heard Dan Slott just made a Gamergate reference in Iron Man. Or made a whole book about Gamergate. Dan, it is the year of our Lord 2018. I know you probably watched John Oliver. John's really fond of going, "It's current year. The one man with worse teeth than me in the world. And you're talking about Gamergate? Hickman wouldn't do that. Because he's got class, it seems. Or he's got sense. He doesn't date his work. And that's one thing that I always liked, I respect about him and this run. But that's one thing that really made it unique, is because you've got these unique players. The second is Jonathan Hickman is really good at doomsday literature. East of West is another good example of that. His Fantastic Four had feelings of that, because his Fantastic Four leads into his Avengers and his new Avengers. But in his Avengers is basically an apocalypse story, and I think that's part of what lends itself to it, because Hickman understands something. This is something Ethan Van Sciver and I talked about, is that if you really want to make something feel heroic, you place your hero against the darkest force you can think of, and let it test them as a character. That's part of the reason why I love the character of Carnage so much, is I couldn't think of a darker character in the Spider-Man Rogues Gallery than Carnage at his introduction. A villain that would throw a baby out of a window and run away laughing, which he literally does. And I'll talk about David Michelini some other time, but it tested the mettle of the character. So how would you test the mettle of some of the mightiest heroes ever? Because again, you look at this lineup of heroes here. I'll pull it open. I'll show you. This lineup of heroes is incredible when you think about it. If I can find the page I was looking at earlier. I'm terrible. I am terrible today. But you think of this lineup. I'll just go ahead and list like who I know offhand. Is you've got Cap, you've got Iron Man, you've got Thor, you have Spider-Man, you have Black Widow, Hawkeye, Shang-Chi. I might have mentioned Hyperion, but I'll say it again. Hyperion, the Hulk, Captain Marvel, as in Carol Danvers, long-standing Avenger, Captain Frickin' Universe, the Falcon. You know, Cannonball and Sunspotter aren't exactly weak people. The Star Brand. You know, you look at this team here. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it that well. You look at this Avengers team. How do you test that? It's not easy. So, what do you really test their mettle with at this point? What is left for the Avengers to face? The end of all things. It really is all that you can really do with them at this point, because they faced everything. Ultron, you know, other genocidal maniacs, Kang the Conqueror. You know, there's not much left for these characters. And I don't know if Hickman realized that, but that was part of what made it so unique, this book, is because even when faced with Armageddon, as Rorschach says in Watchmen, you know, never compromise. And that was part of what made this book so interesting. And the story of Hickman's Avengers, you know, which is Avengers and New Avengers, they're meant to be read together, is what about the character of these people is tested? Where will they break? Where will they concede ground against others? What will they do? What mistakes will they make? And in this book and others, there are many mistakes made by Black Bolt, by Black Panther, by Namor, by all of the members of the Illuminati. And the one guy who does not compromise throughout the story is Captain America. And dear God, Hickman writes a wonderful Captain America, because he makes him uncompromising, but he doesn't make him stupid, which is kind of what I think that a lot of people tend to do with Cap. He's old-fashioned, he's stubborn, but he's not dumb. He knows what he's doing, and he knows what he's capable of doing. He knows what he's capable of leading men into battle to defeat. And he never loses his confidence. And he's always got a plan. That's how Hickman writes him, and so what makes him so good. And he writes these other characters, the Illuminati characters, as men who consider themselves futurists, consider themselves to be wise, consider themselves to be the ones who are capable of paving the road to the future. Some men will envision it. They're the ones who will build that road. And you kind of see where they start to give in to the temptation, where someone like Captain America would not. And then when it all comes to a head, ooh, mama. You thought Civil War was a hell of a story. This, unlike Civil War, this actually ends awesomely. It is a definite recommendation if you've never read Hickman's Avengers. There's that. Plus, of course, you know, you've got the art is wonderful. You have Mike Deodato Jr. who's on this. You have Leilani Francis Yu on it. Let me show you a couple of. I'll see if I can find a good 2-page spread. There's not a lot of them, oddly enough, but what do we got here? But some of the art on this is just... It's just beautiful. I'm going to try to find this one page that Laniel Francis Hugh, I always mispronounce his name, so I apologize for that, did of Thor that I thought was fucking incredible. Here it is, I think. No, this is the Builders. Where's it at? It was you that did it, I think. I mean, it's just great art all around, but here it is. This is one of those pages, man, that I could, when I read this, and then I read it, and I went back and I read it while listening to Twilight of the Thunder God by the Sabaton version, and you'll kind of see why. Look at the art on this. Look at the coloring. Like, the colorist, how he did a wonderful job with this. The basic idea is that these builders, that alien that's got a giant gaping hole in its stomach, are leading an armada to destroy the universe, for better or worse, or to conquer it, rather, because only they can handle the coming storm of the end of all things. And Thor throws his hammer around a sun, takes this fucking thing's abuse, and then he summons Mjolnir back to him, and it goes through the thing's gut, and then he squashes its fucking head. And then I think, if I remember right, Ronan the Accuser kills the Kree Supreme Intelligence as well. And it's just a great moment of, fuck you, we're not giving up, we're going to fight you until we can't fight anymore. Which really is the attitude of the Avengers. It's just, Tony Stark says it great in the movie. If we can't protect the world, we'll damn sure avenge it. So anyway, what makes it exactly the last great Marvel comic? Well, I would think that what really makes it that, more so than anything, is the fact that since this book finished and Jonathan Hickman left Marvel after Secret War and they rebooted everything and they did all new, all different, they cannot make a good move to save their lives. They honestly can't do it. It just kind of seems like one thing after another, they are just disappointing. You know, even when they got rid of Axel Alonso, who oddly enough was the editor-in-chief during this book, which is surprising, I know, but Axel, oddly enough, had some good books while he was the EIC. But you think about it, and you think about what they've had since then, and the writers that are under their staff, who have written very good comics in the past, you would think that they would be able to produce something that's really memorable. But outside of Venom, they have not. And that's what's unfortunate, is they've had so many good writers writing for them, past and present. And they all have talent. But it seems like they just can't make a good decision. Nobody at Marvel can. You know, you have writers that are talented, in my opinion. I think Nick Spencer's a talented writer. I just think he's a pompous, git. But and you've got other people at Marvel that are talented, but just aren't able to produce the way that they really need to create not just books that sell, but books that are going to be remembered 20, 30, 40 years down the road. You know, are people going to remember Nick Spencer's Spider-Man like they remember David Michelini's Spider-Man? Fuck no. They're not going to, because as of right now, it's trash. It really just is not exciting to read. It really feels like he's pulling his punches, because he knows that if he really throws something out there that's, aside from having Mary Jane and Spider-Man be back together again, he's going to fall flat. People are going to hate it because he can't shut up about his own fucking politics. Dan Slott doesn't care anymore. Mark Waid is crazy and a prick. And it goes on from there. And Marvel has no desire to right the ship. You know, I think her name is like Sana Amanant or whatever. Like, she doesn't care to right the ship. The more progressive, the better to her. You know, as long as Disney's not pissed off, Ike Perlmutter doesn't give a fuck. You know, Tom Brevoort's going to do everything he can to hold on to his job as long as he can so he can retire with a decent little chunk of change in his 401k. And the same with a lot of other writers at Marvel. There's, outside of, Donny Cates, there's just no good young talent. And it sucks because there is talent there that's also being wasted. I think the one thing is that they're also, I'm told from people that, and I've watched videos where people say that Marvel's page rate for artists is shit. I've actually heard that from people who know people, so it's third-hand information, but it's still frightening to hear it from these folks, and you look at the treatment of Jim Starlin when he wanted to come in and write this trilogy of Thanos graphic novels that it's like, this is the guy whose writings inspired Infinity War. That's gonna fucking sell, you morons. I don't get it, but that's the thing. Jonathan Hickman's Avengers will be the death of Marvel Comics in more than one way if Marvel cannot right the ship. But if nothing else, this is a hell of a comic to go out on. I would just hope that at some point they'll be able to right the ship. And I don't think that a person like Jonathan Hickman probably would like a right-wing guy like me. Somebody probably would lie to him and say that I'm a racist or some bullshit. But I would like to thank a guy like a Jonathan Hickman for a book like this and like many other stuff that he's written along with his Avengers. And guys like Chris Claremont with his X-Men and so on and so forth. Because it takes a guy like me, and I have to realize to myself that if I'm going to get into the industry, that's what I'm chasing at the end of the day. I know I say that a lot, but that is what I'm chasing. That is what if I cannot and I'm not willing to compete with that or try to compete with that, I might as well not show up. So, my recommendation for those of you, by the time this is published, there will probably still be Black Friday sales going on in regards to comic books on Comixology. Pick up all of Hickman's stuff. Avengers and New Avengers. And Infinity and all of it. It is worth your money. It is a phenomenal team book. It is probably the best team comic since Grant Morrison's Justice League. And that's saying something. Because Grant Morrison's Justice League is mind-blowing too. So, and it is easily the greatest Avengers run ever. I like Busiek's run. I like John Byrne. I like, obviously, I like Jeff Johns' run as well, short as it was. But this is the best one. Nothing else comes close, in my opinion. So pick it up. My name is Micah Curtis. I'll see you next time. Davis Volt.